There we go. Okay. So this mill is in Minden. Minden is down here at the bottom of the VNT. The mill being right about the center of Minden here, right off 395 where Buckeye takes off. Anybody that's driven through the area, it's kind of hard to miss. It's the biggest thing around. So a little bit of background, flour mills in the Carson Valley. There were 5 of them. First one was built in 1854 over in Genoa, and the last one is built here in Minden. First one here, the Reese Mill, built in 1854. 1865, they moved it down to where Kingsbury Reid at that time took off. Now it's a little further south, down around Montsville. Picture from Grace Dambrug's book here of when it was the Cary Mill, which would have been 1865, early 1870s, somewhere in there. Second one to be built was the Bott Mill in Bottsville, 1857, 1858, somewhere around there. Third one, the Douglas Flour Mill, originally built down southeast of Gardnerville, here on the Long Valley Creek, 1895. In 1912, they moved it up to Gardnerville, built a new building. See the old building here and the newer one here. This mill, the machinery for it was hauled into Carson on the VNT, since that was as far as the VNT went at that time. And they hauled the rest of it down by wagon. The other mills were a little earlier for that. Fourth one was Eagle Roller Mill Company. Don't know much about that other than it was north of Genoa a little bit. They're off of Jackson Valley Road on Adams Creek. And then the Minden Mill here. They started construction in March of 1906, finished up in April of 1907, but it took them about 6 months to get power out to it. It took it a little bit longer to get it. This was the first mill powered by electricity, and they brought the electricity in from around Floreston on the Truckee River. 65,000 bushels of grain once they built the silos, about 100 barrels a day. 1942, previously they had experimented with different feed, chick feed in the 20s and out into cattle feed in the 30s. 1942, they converted all the way over to a feed mill, and it becomes the Minden Milling Company. They dropped the flour, although I don't think they repainted the signs. Closed in the late 60s, and this was the only mill served by the VNT or any railroad, and the only one that's still standing. So physical history here, some illustrations of what it looked like through its lifetime. When I first built it, no silos, no warehouse, nothing else, just the brick building. But they ran out of capacity really quickly, and within a year built some silos. And a couple months later, a warehouse as well. Stayed pretty much the same here for a number of years. 1921, Minden formed a volunteer fire department. Until then, they just relied on anybody that had a hose. And around that time, they put a fire siren up here on the top of the mill, being the tallest point in the valley there. 1924, the mill goes through, changes directors a couple of times, and they end up building an office right here on the side. Also around this time, probably the same time, they widened out the dock here. It used to be about half as wide here, in line with the extension here. But I haven't seen any pictures of it with just the mill, or just the office here, between the 20s and probably the 40s. So not sure if it was ever open like that or if they closed it in at the same time, but at some point in time, they close it in, both sides, both the front and the back here, next to the tracks, including the walkway here. There was a walkway over to the Buyers Mercantile, which was right next door. That gets closed in as well. And then after 1940, maybe 1943, you get this nice big structure here. They build up, start adding a bunch of machinery in here for all of the feed. And that's largely what it looks like today. Some historical images. Early on here, 1907, 1908, there's one of the few shots that shows anything of the back, the railroad side. Looks like probably only 3 windows here. Go back here to the very beginning here. Sorry. Yeah, I've drawn it here without any windows here or on this side here, which is largely conjecture. I don't have any photos of those sides there. They get covered in fairly recently. But based on that photo and a couple of others, I'm assuming that's the way it looked. And again, this isn't a very good picture here. Maybe there's a window there, maybe not. This picture here from Stephen. Nice view of the early mill from the more commonly photographed side here from the road with the tracks going behind. You can see the early walkway here going to Buyers Mercantile. First well, early dairy, creamery, and they're in the process of building a large hay barn here, which gets destroyed in the windstorm of 23. Another picture here, this is the early 20s, before they put the warehouse in here. It's still open. You can see the roof line of the shed here pretty much aligns with the line coming down off of the breezeway there between the silos. Picture of the fire siren up there. 1923 Sanborn. Here you can see that the silos here, they're not really centered on the mill itself, but they're centered on the overall dimensions of the mill, which means they're actually to the north a little bit of the center line of the mill. Here's a really lousy picture from a really big aerial photo looking at the north side of the mill here. You can see the little addition here on the section between the silos and the building, but the big structure on the north side hasn't been built yet. But it does appear that the roof line comes all the way across the breezeway or the platform here to Myers Mercantile, so it was probably all enclosed by 1940. This photo here was not dated, but you can see the roadside platform here has been enclosed, and the platform going to Myers Mercantile is enclosed, and there's nothing here on the back. Would be able to see a little bit coming down. Probably. Another really lousy picture from Farrell's book. In the very background of a photo of the last day train. And at first, I didn't see anything here, and so I was thinking the addition was built after this, after 1950. But looking at it really closely, you can kind of see the shape here of that addition. It really blends into the background, being silver and kind of a gray day, but I'm pretty sure that it was in by this time. Another photo from Steve and Drew, late 60s. Very similar to what it looks like today, except the platform is still there. That's gone now and is a parking lot. And the remnants of the barley drying house there in the back is still standing. That's also a parking lot. Part of what I was using to guesstimate the window configuration on the west and the north sides here, this is the metal section with the silos, part of the silo right here. And you can kind of see the outline of a window right here. And looking up, there's nothing right here, so I'm thinking that probably there weren't windows there. I believe on the original mill, on the inside, there were some storage bins here. That's where they had their storage before they put the big silos in. So it would make sense that there aren't windows there, but... And then the north side here, you can see arches on the top of the 3 columns here, and then nothing here. So presumably there weren't windows in the second and third stories there as well. Here's a aerial photo by Jack Freer, took with his drone. And here you can see that the roof line here and the addition that they built onto the side wall here are not centered on that west wall. See, there's a gap right here of the original wall. Then they built up, and then it comes straight down on this side of the mill here. You can also see it's a good representation here of the different roof lines on the side of the storage room. The roof line here, this being a longer platform, is continuous from the peak here. This one, there's actually a little drop here, and then the roof starts out. And then a bunch of references here, both print and online. And I think these are duplicated in your handout. If you want more information or anything. Any questions?
Did they load stuff from the BT, flour and stuff like that? They did, how they do it?
Yes, I believe they did. They had 2 teams early on that would take flour out to the surrounding area in wagons down as far as Bodie. Later on, I think 1917, they bought their first truck and started adding onto a truck fleet from then. I believe they also shipped stuff out over the V&T as well. Steve sent me something from UNR for in the late 40s, I think. It shows something like 40 carloads of feed coming into the mill and nothing going out. But presumably they shipped flour out on V&T as well.
Was this a Dangberg operation like most of the rest of Minden?
Dangberg was on the board of the mill. There were 5 or 6 people, I believe, on a lot of the prominent ranching families were there, but it was at Dangberg as well.
On the northwest side of the silos, there's a hole covered by a grill. Is that where they dump stuff to feed it to the mill, or do you know anything about that?
No, I don't. Right about here?
Right about there, yeah.
Yeah, there's a wood-covered structure here, and right now there's a little shed right there that doesn't show in the earlier photos. Is that the scale? Okay.
And that graded area is where they dump the grain and whatnot. The trucks that come in, they weigh it, and then they dump it, and then it is ordered into the silos.
And so that would have been probably after they put the silos in. I'm not sure what they did before that.
I've got a question on that one view you showed with the 3 arches
Yes,
in the one bay. Is there, right there, back, that one, do you know if there was a door there on that bay that doesn't have the big arch? A normal walk-through door?
I don't know. I believe, and it's hard to tell without actually getting inside, but I believe there were windows on all 3 stories here, 2 windows here, and a door, and then a window on the first story here, similar to what was on the front side. But I don't know for sure.
What year was that shed part in front added?
This one,
Yeah.
after 1940,
Yeah.
sometime between 1940 and 1950.
Curtis, what's the current condition, situation with the mill? Is it abandoned? Is it used for anything?
The, still owned by Bentley, and they are in the process of converting it over into a distillery. So I think there's a link on the back of the page. They have a Facebook page where they've posted a number of interior shots where they've gone through and cleaned it out, and there's some nice pictures in there. Unfortunately, none that show real good detail down here on the bottom. There's 1 or 2 that kind of shoot looking down, and so you can see there are windows or doors in a number of the bays there, but it's hard to tell exactly what's there.
What was the shop configuration? Was it double-ended siding or single?
Single-ended, I believe. Let's see. So out over here, you've got the wool warehouse that they would also store some flour in. They also used the westernmost end of the Myers Mercantile building here. After that, there was another warehouse here, the Grunkel warehouse, which was used by the Reno Milling Company. They had a big mill there where the V&T took off of the Central and Southern Pacific. So they would store a lot of flour there and ship it down to their mill. And right about in the middle of that warehouse, that second warehouse, I think the spur ended, based on the 1917 map.
What else have you done on Minden?
Not a whole lot. I've started laying out some roads and starting to build some of the buildings and things, but not enough to give a nice progression through the years for the town itself.
So this is the first piece of Minden that you've done?
Yes. This was more of the focus of the presentation, so I went into a lot more detail on the model here instead of doing a lot of lower detail ones for the town itself. So,
The siren on the mill originally served 2 purposes. One, to notify the Douglas County Engine Company. It was not the Minden Volunteer Fire Department, it was Douglas County Engine Company. And the second purpose, it went off at noon and 6 to let everybody in the valley know when it was time to come in to eat.
right, yes. That took on some other connotations later on too, and I think there was a big dust up about 10 years back
Yeah, I was.
around that.
I was fire chief at the time. The siren broke, and I decided it was too expensive to repair because it was 1920s vintage. And there was quite a dichotomy within the community of having the siren back and not having the siren. But the will of the people, they went to the county manager, and he went to my board of directors, and I had to spend the $7,000 to fix the siren, and it's still working today.
Over at the fire station now,
Yeah,
right?
it's on the Douglas County Engine Company Fire Station.
Yeah. Some of the later pictures here, or even today, you can see just the wood support for it, which tends to move back and forth across the roof. I think now it's more on the western side.
Yeah, it's on a metal tower now, sorry.
Yeah.
I was gonna ask how many people
No idea.
How
Sorry.
many worked, he says none.
Well, none right now.
None at the time.
They're drinking.
Chris, you mentioned the barley roasting facility, and it looked like it was originally corrugated and then later brick?
Yeah, so the early Sanborn maps show it as corrugated iron on a wood frame. The 1912 or 13 Sanborn map show it like that. The 23 Sanborn map shows it with brick facing. And then Stephen's photos in the late 60s show still a brick facing.
Real brick or that asbestos brick they were using back in that?
Don't know.
That came with sheets. Real brick. Curious? That's real brick.
If you talk to Bentley, isn't it possible for you to potentially get in? I mean, they're pretty easy.
Anything's possible, but they said they don't like people to go inside their buildings. Probably insurance reasons. Companies tend to be a little risk averse around things like that.
It could be. Usually, they've been pretty good, open to, of course, when it was Bentley, really, before GE bought it, it was easier, but still.
But this is still Bentley, I think, Bentley Holdings or something. It's still, I think Chris Bentley runs it now.
Oh, okay, well.
So this isn't the rotating machinery part of it that was
No,
sold
I
to
know it's
Bentley. There
not,
was,
so that's a different location.
yeah, there's a umbrella organization that's still
Well,
in
and
the
they
family.
also just
I
sold
think.
off some of their things, so, which I paid, limited it to, I mean, I said, oh, yeah, that's interesting, and then it went off the other side.
Sorry.
Okay, Chris. I was just wondering, do you know anything about the model that was made about 20 years ago on the Minden Mills?
Yeah, so C.C. Crow did a plaster hydrocount cast model, and he published his drawings in fine scale modeler, I think.
Mainline model.
Mainline modeler.
Still
And
available on eBay or?
yes, there are copies of that still available. And I used those as a basis for some of these models here. He's got a little bit of discrepancies in there, but usual caveats, look at photos too.
Do you know which spirits Bentley is planning on using?
No idea.
Call them up, make suggestions.
Anyone else? Thank you.
So it looks like Minden will once again have